This is going to be a bit of a controversial video here, but everybody talks about the players you need to be picking up off waivers, but nobody talks about the people you should be avoiding that will burn a hole through your roster, and that is exactly what I'm going to do in this video today. So if you do find this kind of video valuable in any kind of way, make sure to be subscribed if you're new, but you guys know me, I don't like to waste any time in these videos. So let's jump to the very first trap sitting on your waiver wire, waiting for you to pick him up and waste a roster spot on him. And that is Matt Breida and this entire Giants backfield with no Saquon. And this might be a little bit on the edge of what people are thinking the narrative is. Talk is obviously on Saquon being injured. And I want to start this off by saying there's been way too many running backs getting injured. It is not okay. It is not fair. You hate to see it. But Matt Breida, or any of these Giants running backs for that matter, they're not anybody you need to be picking up off your waiver. Yes, Matt Breida will come out as the starting running back while Saquon is gone for 2 or whatever weeks it ends up being. In the 2 years that Matt Breida has been on the Giants, he's only ever had 10 carries one time in his entire 2-year career, and that is including time that Saquon has missed before. Most likely what we're going to see moving forward is a complete committee backfield with Eric Gray, Gary Brightwell, and Matt Breida. These are all just replacement level running backs. There is no Kyron Williams breakout in this backfield. You're going to be buying a 2-week dream at running back if you do pick him up. There's better options out there. Don't waste your time. Not to mention that the Giants are getting the 49ers on Thursday night, and we all know that is a terrible matchup to be starting any running backs, let alone replacement guys. And who knows, by then maybe Saquon is back healthy. They won't be running but they won't be running the ball a lot in this game, and Breida has never been a pass catching back ever. But the next trap you need to be avoiding off your waivers and letting somebody else grab and wasting a roster spot on is Craig Reynolds, and this carries a bit of the same narrative as the Matt Breida. You might have never heard this name before, but he is the backup running back on the Lions behind David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Unfortunately, another injury to David Montgomery. He's going to be out a couple weeks with an alleged bone bruise. Who knows how bad it'll be? Not season ending, but definitely a couple weeks. And again, just because injuries do happen doesn't mean the backup running back is an automatic workhorse starter. Yes, Jahmyr Gibbs has not been as involved in the offense as we all hoped he would. Reynolds will get snaps out of this backfield, don't get me wrong, but Reynolds is a Dollar Tree version of David Montgomery, and even if he gets the 40-60 split that we've been seeing with Gibbs and Montgomery, he's not going to be able to do as much with it. The only way Reynolds will be startable even at a flex spot is if he falls in the end zone, and we don't want to be relying off that random chance, because at the end of the day, we're picking up guys off waivers that we think can have a startable potential week or weeks in the future. Craig Reynolds does not have that. Yeah, he's going to be used a decent amount, but it's not going to be valuable touches. But keeping it on brand here with the Lions, the next guy that just don't waste your time picking up off the waivers is Josh Reynolds, the guy who came out here this week and saw 5 receptions for 2 touchdowns. And you might be tempted to pick him up because of the 2 straight weeks of double-digit fantasy points he has produced. But guys, this is nothing more than a random coincidence. You're gonna have random wide receiver 2s and 3s going off for decent point weeks. It happened twice in a row. Don't think anything more of it. The only way he'd be a viable bench piece is if Amon-Ra continued to deal with his injury, it lasted a couple weeks, or Jameson Williams just never comes back from suspension. Both of those things are extremely unlikely to happen. Don't use your waiver priority or all of your fab on random boom guys. You need to be picking up guys that have actual season-long value. If you want that, there is a video on my page that I just posted about the actual true league-winning players you need to be picking up off waivers. I'll pin it in this video. Regardless, though, he is not a guy you need to be picking up off waivers. Let somebody else waste their week's roster spot on getting Josh Reynolds. The next guy you cannot be adding off your waiver wire, and you can't be getting cute with this either, is Nelson Agholor. I'm not going to be talking about him for very long. This one should be obvious. If you're considering picking him up off your waivers, you need to be watching more videos like this. He came out of nowhere getting 6 targets for 5 receptions and a touchdown. You guys know where this is going. He saw less snaps than he did in week 1. Random occurrence of 6 targets. Dell injured. He's 30 years old. He's been on like 20 different teams. He's never been a consistent point scorer. He's not going to get 15 points or even 10 points a game moving forward, even if Odell would have missed the entirety of the season. These targets that Odell is going to leave on the table is going to get funneled back into Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and even Rashad Bateman, you could argue. And this Ravens passing offense just is not viable enough to be starting a guy like Nelson Agholor. The next guy I am not picking up off waivers, and this is for a bit of a different reason and different circumstance, is Tank Dell. He came out last week seeing 10 targets for 7 receptions and 20 fantasy points. A great week for him all around. He's had 2 good matchups against the Ravens and the Colts, for CJ Stroud needing to pass a lot. But looking deeper into a bit more of the reasoning for this, Tank Dell is extremely undersized. He's 5'8", 165 pounds. If we're just looking historically, wide receivers at his height, stature, weight, all of that, just they cannot produce, and they historically never have. There's only been a handful of guys at that size that have gotten 100 fantasy points on the season, and it's only like 3, and they're not any special wide receiver, like crazy Hall of Famer. And again, 100 fantasy points on a season is not a lot. Odds are stacked against Tank Dell, regardless of how good his last week was. They have Nico Collins, they have Robert Woods, they have John Mechie. They have some guys to be viable. Will Tank Dell be the wide receiver 3? Possibly, yeah, he probably will. And I do think he can make a role for himself and cut out some volume in this offense. But at the end of the day, are we going to be able to start him? That is the reason we're picking up these players off the waivers. And the answer to that is probably not all season unless some injuries happen to other wide receivers in this offense. He's got a tough schedule coming up against the Jaguars, Steelers, and Falcons. If Stroud does continue to keep this passing volume up, which he will, because the Texans will be down in a lot of their games. They're not favored in like any game this season. The passing volume is going to be there. I don't really see a world where we can start him in any capacity. There's a whole lot of other wide receivers with more upside in the waivers right now, and you're essentially just wasting a roster spot on a guy that probably won't amount to anything this season. But again, some more players you don't need to be picking up off your waivers by any means is this Ravens backfield. I talked about them last week. I wanted to see how they would operate. I'm keeping them on this do not add them at all video again. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins is out for the season. I wanted to see how this offense would operate. Is it going to be a committee? Yes, it is, and it was continued to be a committee this week. Gus Edwards saw 40% of the snaps while Justice Hill saw 60. Gus Edwards did fall in for the touchdown this week, but besides that, they pretty much had identical fantasy weeks. Justice Hill did get more of the receiving work, but again, the size of the pie to get this value from for the running backs just is not big enough to make either of them startable or even flexible ever. They're not going to be able to be started with confidence. There's no reason they should be rostered in 60% of leagues. That is just way too much. You have Lamar Jackson taking a considerable amount of the rushing work and goal line work. You're going to continue to just rely on random touchdowns. They're going to be split. Do not waste your time rostering them. But another guy I do want to talk about in this video, which might be a little bit controversial to some people, is Tutu Atwell. But this really shouldn't be a surprise. He saw 8 targets in week 1, 9 targets in week 2 with no Cooper Kupp in the offense. And he's been on fire along with Puka Nacua. But when you have Matthew Stafford coming out here and having almost 60 pass attempts, that is insane. He saw less than a 20% target share on 60 attempts. That's not good. Once this number gets cut in half to the regular pass attempts for this offense, there's not going to be as much targets to go around. His numbers are going to get cut in half as well. Yes, he's a fine, borderline flexible guy till Kupp comes back. I personally still don't trust him enough to start him in my lineup every single week with confidence. But once Kupp comes back, he's going to essentially be a non-factor. You shouldn't be coming out here and blowing all of your fab or your first waiver priority on a guy that's going to be phased out. Yes, he's going to have those boom weeks like he just did. He's going to get points here and there, especially before Kupp comes back. But if we're using the waivers, we want to be getting guys with season-long value that can win leagues, not just win a week or two. The next guy I want to talk about that you shouldn't be rostering is Gerald Everett. He's rostered in about 40% of leagues right now. I don't think it's necessary to be that high. I've been talking about his situation for years and nothing has changed. When you have Keenan Allen, when you have Mike Williams, when you have Austin Eckler, when you now have Quentin Johnston, there's just not enough pieces of the pie to go around. If you're looking for comparisons, I would take rookie Sam Laporta over him every single day of the week. And you also can't make the case that if any of these Chargers receivers are out, he's gonna be startable, because we've seen that last week with Austin Eckler. That's so many targets being opened up in this offense. They didn't go to Gerald Everett. We see last year, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen combined for 11 missed games. Again, he didn't average over 8 fantasy points the entirety of that season. He's not gonna be reliable even if these guys miss time. And now you have to account for the fact that they have Quentin Johnston to fill in that role for if one of these other wide receivers leaves. The targets just get funneled back into the receiving options. Gerald Everett, he does not get the benefactor of that. I would argue that you should look at Zach Ertz, Jake Ferguson, or even Luke Musgrave instead of him. Yes, Gerald Everett might be the more fundamentally safe guy, but he's not going to come out and win leagues. He's never going to have a huge fantasy week, and these other guys have potential to have big fantasy weeks and be startable. I would take all of those guys over Gerald Everett. We know what we're getting with him, and it's not a lot. But that is going to finish off the video of the absolute waiver traps you need to be avoiding. Let other people pick up these guys while you're picking up the actual league winners. If you guys did enjoy this kind of video, I drop one of these every single week around the waiver time. So make sure to be subscribed, like it up, put your notifications on, do whatever you got to do, and I will see you guys in the next video.